We're here today with Professor Skye Stephens of St. Mary's University. Welcome, Skye.
Thank you for having me.
So today we'd like to talk about, it's been alarming in the papers, recent cases of individuals charged with sexual assault against children. Once again, we're seeing a court case come up where a priest has been accused. So what would you say here in Nova Scotia? Are these crimes on the increase, or are we simply experiencing more coverage of them?
We know from our statistical data that the rates of childhood sexual abuse and sexual abuse more generally are decreasing, and they have been decreasing since the 80s and the 90s, which is consistent with a much larger trend that we also see in the data that violent crime is decreasing. And so in terms of the data, that I think is a very consistent message that's being kind of shown in the wider kind of data, but also when we ask people about their victimization as well, we've seen a general decline.
So that's obviously good news, but still might be, people would welcome that news, but yet they still may be wondering, why do we continue to see those specific cases which really do horrify us? What's behind the crimes that we do see, and why are they occurring?
I mean, there are many different motives that can explain why someone commits a crime. And I think one of the more important kind of things to think about is to shift the conversation from motive to talk about how we can actually prevent this in the future and continue to provide preventative programming, rehabilitation services, so that we can continue, hopefully, along this trend of a decreasing rate of sexual violence.
So in your field as a criminal psychologist, what do criminal psychologists focus on? Do not focus on, as the TV shows would have us believe, finding out the motive of why someone commits the crime?
Well, I mean, that's important in terms of when you're working with these individuals, you have to understand why they're doing it in order to intervene, to rehabilitate, right? To kind of help people, because many of these individuals will go and they'll serve a sentence, but they will eventually be reintegrated into the community. So we need to have an understanding of why they committed that crime in the first place in order to kind of understand the factors that we need to target so that they, hopefully when they reintegrate, won't go on to do this in the future. So it is important. But as a forensic psychologist, I'm much more interested in, before that person went and committed whatever the crime was, the day before, they were not an offender. So can we target that person in that time period to prevent the act of violence from occurring in the first place? So I'm very interested in kind of shifting the focus to more preventative efforts.
How do people in your field actually do their work? What type of research do you actually research the subjects themselves?
Yeah, so a lot of the data research I've done has involved doing interviews with people who have committed crimes. I've also done a lot of clinical work, so that involves interacting with these individuals. A lot of psychologists use a lot of assessment measures, so they not only ask people about what's happening, but they might give them like self-report measures to look at kind of how they report in that aspect. We could observe behavior as well. We can use physiological measures as well. So it's a kind of a complex way of looking at data from kind of different perspectives.
So remediation or preventative measures, are they working?
So right now, we do know, I think, that preventative efforts are effective. So, and one of the areas that I'm particularly interested in is there is programming that's offered over in Germany to people who are at risk of committing sexual violence against children because they have a sexual interest in them, and they're actually able to provide services to those individuals who have not offended. And we know from the data that's just slowly starting to emerge that this looks like a very promising approach.
Thank you very much for your interview today. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll wind it back and look at it. Okay.